Angie Dickinson, the woman once crowned as America's ultimate screen siren, lived through the kind of betrayals most only whisper about. She wasn't just a beauty of the silver screen. She was a survivor of love affairs gone wrong, friendships turned cold, and power plays that nearly erased her career. For decades, she stayed silent. But time has a way of stripping away glamour, leaving only truth. And Angie's truth: 6 powerful men, lovers, friends, even legends, who left scars she never forgave. These weren't just breakups or Hollywood feuds. They were betrayals that changed the course of her life. Today we peel back the curtain on those untold stories, the passion, the obsession, the control, and the heartbreak that shadowed one of Hollywood's most beloved women. Some of the names will shock you, others you might never expect. But one thing is certain: once you hear what really happened, you'll never look at these icons the same way again. Let's begin. Number 1. Frank Sinatra. In the early 1960s, few names carried more weight in Hollywood than Frank Sinatra. He was magnetic, unpredictable, and powerful, both in music and in the film industry. Angie Dickinson, already turning heads with her roles in Rio Bravo and other projects, fell hard for that energy. To the world, their relationship seemed like a glamorous love story. 2 icons walking into clubs arm in arm, sharing tables with the Rat Pack, glowing under the flash of cameras. What no one saw was how quickly that glow turned into something darker. At first, Sinatra showered her with affection. Roses arrived at her door, dinners stretched into dawn, and he spoke to her like she was the only woman alive. Angie later admitted that she thought he was the love of her life. But love with Frank came with conditions, and those conditions grew more suffocating as the years went on. When she accepted a role that required an on-screen kiss, Sinatra lost his composure. He told her flatly that no man was allowed to touch her, not even as part of her job. That wasn't a request, it was a rule. From there, the relationship shifted. He became possessive, monitoring who she spoke to, questioning her every move. Angie recalled moments that felt like surveillance disguised as romance. One night, after she returned from a casting he hadn't approved, she found her belongings destroyed and every photo of them together burned. He never struck her, but his actions left scars just as deep. The message was always the same: her life belonged to him. His influence extended beyond their private life. When Angie was nominated for a promising role in an independent film in 1970, Sinatra quietly intervened. At 2 in the morning, he called the director and delivered a chilling ultimatum. If she stayed in the movie, the director's career was finished. By the next day, the role was gone without explanation. Angie never forgot how one phone call could erase months of work and ambition. For years, she carried the contradiction of loving someone who also destroyed her opportunities and sense of self. She admitted she once considered marrying him, but ultimately walked away, unwilling to give up what little independence she had left. Later in life, she described the relationship with brutal honesty. He was, in her words, wonderful and foolish, but also impossible to forgive. Even decades later, she said the shadow of his control lingered. Sinatra never publicly acknowledged her pain, never denied it, never apologized. He didn't need to. His silence was power enough. But Sinatra wasn't the only man whose influence left scars on Angie's life. The next betrayal came not from romance, but from Hollywood's hidden power games, and it nearly ended her career overnight. Number 2. Burt Bacharach. To the public, Burt Bacharach and Angie Dickinson seemed like the perfect Hollywood match. She was at the height of her career, a star whose elegance lit up both film and television. He was the celebrated composer, writing timeless hits like Walk On By and Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. Their wedding in 1965 was seen as a union of glamour and artistry, the kind of story magazines loved to print. But inside their home, the reality was far less romantic. Almost from the start, Angie felt the distance. Burt was rarely home, claiming inspiration pulled him to the studio or to late-night clubs. Nights stretched on with Angie waiting by the door, hoping to hear his key turn in the lock, only to be left alone. What she called loneliness, he dismissed as the price of genius. When their daughter Nikki was born in 1966, Angie thought it might bring them closer. For a short time, it did. But when Nikki was diagnosed with autism, a condition few understood at the time, the cracks widened into a canyon. Angie carried the weight of motherhood almost entirely on her own. She became nurse, teacher, and protector, while Burt drifted further away. His reaction to Nikki's struggles left her stunned. Angie recalled holding their daughter while he asked coldly, "Will she affect my schedule?" In that moment, she realized she wasn't just abandoned as a wife, she was abandoned as a mother. The betrayal grew sharper when she discovered he wasn't even hiding his affairs. One night, as she tried to sleep, she heard laughter downstairs. It wasn't music or work. It was Bert entertaining another woman under their roof, while Angie and their newborn were just a floor away. For her, that moment killed whatever was left of their marriage. By 1981, they divorced. The press called it amicable, but Angie later admitted there was nothing kind about it. She described her feelings toward him not as hatred, but something colder, loathing. The deepest wound wasn't his neglect of her, but his abandonment of Nikki. Years later, when tragedy struck and Nikki took her own life, the divide between Angie and Bert became permanent. They didn't grieve together. They barely spoke at all. Bert admitted to infidelity in his memoir, but his words were detached, clinical, without apology for the devastation left behind. Angie carried those wounds for decades, calling him one of the men she could never forgive. And if betrayal in marriage left her scarred, the pain cut even deeper when a man she once trusted as a friend used loyalty as a weapon and turned it against her. Number 3. Johnny Carson. Angie Dickinson never thought betrayal would come from a friend. Her connection with Johnny Carson was built on years of appearances on The Tonight Show. Whenever she joined him on stage, the chemistry was undeniable, playful, flirty, and electric. Audiences loved it, and Angie trusted it. Off camera, she believed Carson was someone who had her back in an industry where loyalty was rare. For a while, that seemed true. But everything changed on a night that was supposed to honor her career. She was set to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award, the kind of moment that felt like closure after decades of work. Backstage, Carson was handed an old interview clip where Angie had casually mentioned the name of a disgraced producer, someone Hollywood had collectively buried. She hadn't meant harm. It was an offhand remark. Carson had a choice: shield her, warn her, or ignore it. What he did instead left her stunned. On live television with millions watching, Carson introduced her with a line that seemed like praise but carried a blade underneath. Our Angie is a timeless icon, a woman who knows when to speak and when to stay silent. The audience laughed and applauded, unaware of the weight behind his words. Angie smiled, but inside she understood exactly what he had done. He had turned her into an example, a cautionary tale dressed as a compliment. The fallout came quickly. Invitations stopped arriving, awards lists no longer carried her name, and producers who once called her suddenly kept their distance. It wasn't loud or obvious, but Angie felt the shift. Years later, she admitted that Carson's betrayal wasn't about what he said, it was about the message behind it. He wasn't protecting her, he was warning her. Crew members who were backstage that night remembered the tension. One writer later claimed, Carson told him, "She almost walked into a landmine. I cleaned it up for her. She should be grateful." But Angie wasn't grateful. Gratitude was never the issue. The issue was trust. Trust that she thought was unshakable. They never spoke about it again. Carson never apologized, never admitted to what he had done, and Angie never confronted him. Instead, their friendship withered into silence. Decades later, when asked who she could never forgive, his name was on the list, not because of romance or scandal, but because he betrayed her loyalty in the moment she needed it most. But if Carson's betrayal came quietly, the next chapter in Angie's life was anything but. The man who followed didn't just break her trust, he smothered her with an obsession disguised as love. Number 4. Larry King. Larry King wasn't a Hollywood leading man or a powerful studio executive. He was the voice millions trusted every night, the man with suspenders, a microphone, and an uncanny ability to make anyone talk. To the public, he was a straight-shooting interviewer. To Angie Dickinson, he became something far different. Their relationship began quietly, with no red carpet fanfare or tabloid gossip. At first it felt like comfort, a refuge from the chaos of Hollywood. But comfort turned quickly into something that felt suffocating. Angie later described it, not as love, but as control, dressed up as devotion. Larry never raised his voice or lashed out in public. Instead, he had a way of watching her that made her feel smaller by the day. Every time I smiled at someone else, she said, he would just stare. No words, just a stare that made me want to disappear. It was a form of possession that crept into every corner of her life. She began to lose friends without realizing why. Invitations dried up, roles slipped away. At first, Angie thought it was coincidence, but it wasn't. Behind closed doors, Larry knew how to isolate her while convincing her it was love. He'd pace the floor if she came home late, smash a television if she praised a co-star, and once, she discovered something chilling, a small microphone hidden under the seat of her car. He wanted to know if she sighed when she thought of someone else. When Angie tried to walk away, he turned the drama inward. He drank heavily, smashed a mirror, even collapsed against her, whispering, "I love you so much, it's driving me crazy." It wasn't devotion, it was emotional hostage-taking. For a time, Angie mistook it for passion. She even wrote in her journal that pain was the price of great love. Years later, she admitted she finally understood the truth. Real love doesn't come with fear. Larry never spoke about Angie publicly, not in interviews or memoirs. Insiders say he referred to their relationship as tormented romance, but to Angie it was suffocation. When King passed in 2021, Angie didn't issue a statement, didn't appear in memorial specials, didn't say a word. She had already grieved inside the relationship itself. And while Larry King's obsession dismantled her personal world, another man would strike at the very core of her career. Number 5. Jack Webb. In Hollywood, some men didn't need to shout to wield power. Jack Webb was one of them. Known as the mastermind behind Dragnet and other gritty television dramas, Webb operated with precision, discipline, and silence. He wasn't the kind of man who made scenes in public. His influence worked through closed doors, whispered phone calls, and decisions that could shape or end careers in an instant. For Angie Dickinson, that power turned into devastation. By the mid-1970s, Angie was at the peak of her career. She had already broken barriers with her role in Policewoman, proving that a female lead could carry a primetime series. Producers admired her talent, audiences adored her, and she had carved out a reputation as one of television's most bankable stars. But all of that meant little when she crossed Jack Webb. The reason? She said no. According to Angie, Webb expected certain unspoken agreements in exchange for maintaining his support. When she refused him, thinking her fame was strong enough to shield her, she quickly learned how fragile even the brightest star could be. Within a single day, 3 roles disappeared. Contracts were cancelled. Calls went unanswered. No one gave explanations. They didn't have to. Her friends whispered the truth. "You said no to him. You're finished." There were no screaming matches, no tabloids splashing the scandal across their covers. Just silence. A career that had been roaring forward suddenly went cold. Angie described the moment as surreal, packing her dressing room in silence, realizing that talent, popularity, and even awards couldn't protect her from one man's quiet revenge. Jack Webb never acknowledged her claims publicly, never admitted to ending her opportunities, never even commented. He didn't need to. The absence of his support was punishment enough. To some, Webb was a pioneer who brought realism to television. To Angie, he was the man who reminded her that in Hollywood, power didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered. Years later, she said she never truly hated him, but she never forgave him either. The betrayal wasn't about romance or even personal affection. It was about principle. She believed talent should speak louder than submission. Jack Webb proved otherwise, and the wound never fully healed. But while Webb's betrayal was cold and calculated, the final man on Angie's list remains wrapped in mystery. Number 6. John F. Kennedy. Among all the names tied to Angie Dickinson's past, none carried more intrigue or controversy than John F. Kennedy. Unlike the others, her connection to him wasn't defined by public appearances or contracts. It was defined by whispers, speculation, and the kind of rumors that refused to die even decades later. Kennedy's reputation as a charmer was legendary. Hollywood stars, socialites, even political insiders spoke of his charisma. He was handsome, daring, and to many women, irresistible. Biographers have claimed Angie was among the women closest to him, suggesting that theirs was the longest running of his rumored affairs. They pointed to weekends in Palm Springs, to stolen moments during campaign stops, even to the night of his inaugural ball, when he supposedly vanished from the celebration to find her. But Angie herself never confirmed the story outright. In fact, she bristled when asked about it in later years. On CBS Sunday Morning, she dismissed the rumors sharply. There was no reason, no grounds for thinking I was seeing him, and I wasn't. Yet in other moments, her words seemed to blur the lines. She once called him devastatingly handsome and admitted he was the kind of man mothers warned their daughters about. In another interview, she described a brief encounter with him as the most exciting moment of her life, then abruptly cut herself off, saying it would be bad manners to say more. The contradictions only fueled speculation. Friends claimed they saw the two together privately, and one associate later remarked that the affair ended only because Kennedy wanted the presidency more than he wanted the relationship. If he could have brought her to the White House without scandal, some believed he would have. But Angie seemed to want the opposite: distance. By the time she was addressing the rumors decades later, her tone carried not nostalgia, but irritation. She wanted to put the story to rest, yet her half-denials kept the fire alive. Kennedy never addressed the rumors himself, and with his assassination in 1963, the possibility of clarity died with him. What remains is a story suspended between truth and myth, a chapter Angie refused to fully confirm or deny. Whether real or imagined, it became part of her legacy, another shadow cast over a woman who had already lived through betrayal, loss, and survival. 6 men, 6 betrayals, some public, some private, and one shrouded in mystery at the highest level of power. But for Angie Dickinson, the pattern was always the same. She forgave herself, but never them. Angie Dickinson's story isn't just about fame or beauty. It's about survival in a world where power often mattered more than truth. Sinatra, Bacharach, Carson, King, Webb, and Kennedy. 6 men whose actions left marks she never forgot. Each one changed her life in a different way, through love, betrayal, control, or silence. And yet, she's still standing. At 93, she speaks with a clarity that comes only after a lifetime of carrying both glamour and pain. "I forgave myself," she said, "but not them." Those words are more than confession. They're a reminder. Hollywood's lights may fade, reputations may crumble, but the scars of betrayal last far longer. And Angie Dickinson's story proves that sometimes the most unforgettable tales aren't about the roles an actress played on screen. They're about the battles she fought when the cameras stopped rolling.